forcing yourself to do something you don't like to do. So I wrote something here. So it says, so courage is like, um, it helps us overcome fear. So it's like Chris said, you want to do something that you don't want to do or like afraid to do. So, and also courage help us to obey God. You know, last time I made you guys read a lot of stuff. So today we're actually gonna read like 2 things only. So I know I love everyone to read. So can somebody read from Joshua 1:5 to 9? You wanna read? Oh, 5 to 9.
No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Okay, so after Moses passed away in chapter 1, so God told Joshua to be strong and of good courage. So you can just imagine that he just went into the promised land and he's leading the Jewish nation behind him. And God, God knew that he needed strength. Like, as you know, the Jewish people never listened to Moses. They always like rebel against God. They always complain. Like when God gave them food from heaven, they always complain like, "What's that?" You know. Like, so they always like he knows that they're complainers. So God wanted to give him the assurance that He's with them. So that what actually gave him courage. So you can be in if you put yourself in place of Joshua. So this guy have like rebellious people following him, and it's like nobody listens to him. Like your Sunday school class, nobody listens, for example. So God, that's an example. That's a bad example. Okay. So the courage God gave him like He gave him assurance. All right, take these people, lead these people, and I'll be with you. So he trusted God's promise, and God even said to him, like in like in part 9, is do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That's the kind of courage that we actually need. So that's why I asked why is courage important at the beginning. So we can learn that from Joshua. As you can see in that part, he was very courageous when he took the people. We'll see why he's courageous in the next part. Okay. So now the leadership. Problem is like all these three characteristics, they all combine together. Basically, you cannot. It's very hard to separate it. At least in Joshua, because Joshua had all of them, and you can see it in all his book, in every action he does, and you can see it. That's why he's like famous with courage. So the second part is the leadership. Can somebody read Joshua 6:3 to 5?
Um, you shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him.
Okay, so I don't have tokens with me, but who knows what city it is? What's the city? Okay, good. Carol. Carol, do you know all the answers? Shouldn't do that. All right. So Joshua wasn't just a brave man; he was also a leader. He led the Israelites through the Jordan River. As you know, he also split the river. You know how, like Moses. That's why the discipleship comes in place. So as Moses departed the Red Sea, Joshua as well parted the Jordan River, and he passed the tabernacle through that river, him and the priest. So God gave Joshua like unusual instruction, like for example, telling him like you're not gonna fight like a normal fight like with swords. You're just gonna walk around the city like 7 times. So as you can see, like he's like it's unusual. Like how we gonna win that war? Like it's a big city with massive walls. How we gonna walk around it? And they're gonna. So this obedience and leadership together. So the first one we had courage and obedience basically. The second one was leadership and obedience. As you can see, they're both like mixed up together. Then Joshua didn't question God's plan, so he went through it, and it sounded strange. He obeyed, and the wall came down crushing, and they went in and they took over the land. So in pre-talk, I just do some quick notes here. So first thing is you need to be courageous. Well, you need to first to look at Joshua as a servant. He was in his pre-servant. You can see when he stayed in God's house, he trusted God. He was a good disciple to Moses. He was following God's command. So that produced courage, leadership, obedience, all in him. And as you can see, his story, we all recognize him as a courageous person. And that's why, basically, he's a good character in the Bible, I guess. So
You know the other thing, Mario, that you know how he was courageous? That's out of obedience, because the Lord told him, do not be dismayed, or like be courageous, like in chapter 1.
yeah, but
And so
God,
his courage is kind of obedience, even though God gave it to him.
I think God doesn't give him courage. Just from his characteristics. That's what I did last week. I did like the first appearances of Joshua in the book of Exodus, because you can see like what built his character, what made him courageous, what made him like listen to God, what made him obedient, what made him do miracles like splitting the Jordan River, stuff, and destroying walls of Jericho without even drawing a sword, So we need to take like the story from the beginning. So courage is not just given by God, so it's a character development kind of thing. So it's a characteristic. All right, now the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Glory to God forever. Amen.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Mario, for that pre-talk series. Such a great pre-talk series. So to continue on the night, we have our Bible study today, which is on Genesis chapter 38. And we're going to be having Mina Gouhar today giving us the Bible study. So Mina, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Hi everyone. Today we'll be looking at Genesis 38. Let me connect first. Genesis 38. So it moves on from the last chapter. So we follow on with Judah, so the brother of Joseph, and he goes on and does his own thing. For those that know, Genesis 38 is kind of famous for like a few reasons. So some good reasons and maybe some reasons that you might chuckle at. So it's quite action-packed, I think. Every few verses, something something's going on. So it's best that we read it. Try focus as much as we can, because I remember when I read this the first two times, I said, outrageous. Like, what's going on? There's too many names, too many things going on. And yeah, so the key word of my read through was outrageous. I think I said it a couple of times, but it's best we don't judge, okay? Because we'll figure out in a second. Yep. One sec. Sorry, guys. All right. Yep. So we're going to start with Genesis 38. Okay. So overall, if I was to summarize this chapter, it follows as a segue into the genealogy of Christ. Okay. So we'll see where Christ came from. Obviously, this is a descendant of Abraham, right? So God made, just to preface, God made a big promise to Abraham. Can anyone tell me what the promise was? A very broad, famous promise. Yeah.
Many nations.
Many nations. Okay. So we can't forget that God made that. Okay. And we'll see God's by any means necessary. He'll do what he needs to do, because we'll get who comes from Abraham, who comes from David, the very famous man.
Jesus.
Yeah, Christ. That's it. So Christ will come through, and as we mentioned, no matter what story or circumstance or event happens, God will use that situation for good. So we'll see, any sort of failure, any sort of sin that you do, you can't give up. Because if you give up, and some people do kind of give up here in a way, they end for the worst. Okay, so and it's a story of redemption as well. Okay, so enough talking. We're going to get into verse 1 and 2. So whoever can read for me, 1 and 2. Thank you.
It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her.
Beautiful. Okay, so as I said, this leaves Joseph and all his brothers, and leaves Jacob. So this is just Judah now by himself. So he leaves, and he heads to probably a friend named Hira. So he's an Adullamite, and there he sees a daughter of a Canaanite woman. Okay, so he doesn't mention the name of this woman; it just mentions her mother. Okay, and it mentions that she's a Canaanite. Now, why does it mention that she's a Canaanite? Of what importance that she was a Canaanite?
Gentile.
Yeah, and someone warned someone a few chapters back, chapter 24. Someone said, get a wife for my son, but make sure she's not a Canaanite, pretty much. No, one more above. No, sorry, one more above that, sorry. It was Abraham. So Abraham told his servant, he says, I need you to find a wife for my son Isaac, but make sure she's not a Canaanite. Okay, so that's our first, if we were to have, a mistake counter in this, we're already on 1. Probably 2. This is besides setting his brother, yeah. Because, again, this was Abraham's word, so they weren't practicing the things that they were doing, and then Abraham was also promised that they will take over Canaanite regardless. But he wasn't happy he wanted to keep Isaac, he wanted to keep the relationship in the family at the moment. They didn't want anything to do with the Canaanites. And plus eventually they were going to conquer him anyway, so imagine some conflict. Imagine you marry a Canaanite as well, and you're like, I'm going to take your land. Not very right. Anyway, so this was like a direct, command by Abraham. And he's like, his great-grandfather? Whatever, his grandfather. And yeah, so this is already strike 1, strike 2. So the daughter of a Canaanite woman is named Shua. So again, we don't know her name, whom he married and bore children, okay? So as I said, this is, in chapter 24, this is mentioned by Abraham to Abraham's servant. Now, the church fathers that say that Shua means rich. Okay, so the word Shua, or the name Shua, so her mum in this case, means rich, okay? And this is a symbol of, the Jews or the Israel or anyone that leaves, or the whole Jewish nation, they leave for riches, okay? and they live for riches, and they, what they did was they served pagan gods, okay, and they did the things that weren't commanded to them. Okay, so that was pretty much, even just the name, another red flag. Mistake number 3. I won't keep track because there might be a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to judge because you'll see that judging in this chapter doesn't end well. Okay, so we're going to move on to verse 3 to 6. No pressure. If you want to, please.
So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Shezib when she bore him. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar.
Thank you. So this is probably Judah's first step that wasn't a disaster. That wasn't a red flag anyway. So I guess he bears children, right? That's sort of what he needs to do. As he's one of the you could say the patriarchs, the 12 of them, or his siblings, right? This is he has a big role to play. Okay, so he bears children, and he says three children, right? Onan and Shelah. Okay, and now these names, there's going to be a bunch of other names. So what I made a flow chart when I was reading this because I had trouble to keep track of the names myself. So I thought, why not share it with you guys? So this is just of what's relevant to the story. Okay, there's obviously a lot more names. There's a lot more people involved in this later on, but this is just what we need for now. So Judah, he's going to be denoted by the star. Okay. He marries, I guess he goes with a daughter of Shua, and he bears 3 children, okay? I might spoil something. Okay. She bears 3 children, okay? Now, there's a special mention in verse 5, okay? Can someone just read verse 5 again for me, please?
And she conceived yet again and bore a son and called his name Shelah. He was at Shezib when she bore him.
Okay, it mentions that she was at Chizib, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, when she bore him, okay? And this will kind of foreshadow a little bit later on in a couple of verses. So Chizib, they say means, what does it mean? Liar, okay? It just means liar. Why this place is called liar, we'll find out, okay? But there'll be a certain lie here somewhere, well, my verse 5, okay? Regarding Shelah, okay? So is the firstborn. Then you have Onan from left to right is oldest. And the youngest one is Shelah, okay? Now, the firstborn, I think it's mentioned here at verse 6, that he gets a wife named Tamar, okay? Now, Tamar is known as another star because she's a star at the end. She might be a star at the end. But again, she's very important in this story. So pretty much it's Judah and Tamar, pretty much at the moment, okay? The main characters, okay? And we'll find out. Okay, so at the moment Judah has bore 3 children, and one of them is given to Tamar. So Tamar we mentioned is, does it say here? No, it doesn't say. Okay, that's fine. We'll get to that later. Now I'm just going to move on to verse 7 to 10. Thank you.
But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother." But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also.
Very good. So we see that Judah's firstborn is wicked, okay? And it doesn't say, what he did, but he's wicked, and it could be for many things, and it could be even as a result of Judah's actions, okay, to marry a Canaanite woman. So this can be considered as almost as a lesson to Judah and to his siblings. But as humans and most people in the Bible, they don't get it the first time. Okay, how many times have we got something the first time? How many times do we get a lesson the first time? Usually once like the final result happens, or once the really bad thing happens to us, that's when we learn the lesson. Okay, so we'll see it here. So now what's left is, let me just do this so I don't forget. Okay, dead. All right, red means dead. Okay, there's gonna be more death. All right. Now what we're left with is Tamar is alone now. Okay, so Tamar is a widow. Now the thing about widows is back in these days is you can't really be left alone. I mean, surely nowadays, right? But back then it was like if you had more siblings, more male siblings, the next in line. Okay, so we're here that Tamar is now left as a widow, and Judah does the right thing in this case, and he says, what does he say? He tells the youngest, the second, or now the older sibling, Onan, to go marry. Why isn't it? To go marry Tamar. Okay. To go marry Tamar and to raise an heir with his brother. Okay, so with his brothers, with his sister-in-law. Okay, his brother's wife. Okay, so this is custom at the time. This is the right thing to do. Okay, they're obviously doing the right thing here. However, we notice something in verse 9, was it? Yeah, that he didn't want to do it. He refused to. And it says because he knew that the heir would not be his. Essentially, his inheritance, Onan's inheritance will be split now like a minimum 3-way. So before it was going to be Shelah, his younger brother, who's a little bit younger, and him, but now it's shared minimum 3-way. Okay, and that's out of greed. Now, because of this, he gets struck down. Essentially because one, he disobeyed his father, and he said, he chucked it in the bin pretty much. He's like, no, I'm not going to do this. He married her, which I believe he did. Yeah, he did marry her, but then he was selfish as well, and he said, no, I'm not gonna raise an heir. I want the inheritance for myself. So again, he's blinded by greed, essentially. Greed blinds everyone, and I guess we see it most that in the workplace, right? Greed is prevalent, right? It's like you'd step on your colleagues who help you out to get a raise or to get on your boss's good side or anything like that. So, or even with your friends, like you wish when your friend has something. You'd expect, as a friend, you'd be happy for them to share it with you, or you'd be happy for them to praise you, or if you do something well, like they want to share any effort that you do with your friends as a team, maybe in a team sport, right? You'd expect this to happen with you, right? But when you are filled with greed, you essentially become blinded, okay? And that's what happened to Onan here. He's just said, let me just disregard everything that I meant to do. One, he disobeyed his father's commandment. And secondly, he stopped his lineage. Or he was attempting. He's like, what's the point of having children? I just want my short-term rewards, whether it's money or land or cattle or whatever. He threw everything out the window just for the short term. Okay? And that's something that we need to keep in mind as well, because we do the same. We might end our long-term success or goals, whether spiritually or physically, for short-term pleasure or for short-term ideas, okay? So we need to keep that in mind. And that's, one of many lessons that we'll cover here. And it sort of gets a bit more meat, towards the end of the chapter. So as a result, he's struck down. That was too quick. Okay? Done. So we're going to move on to verse 11. Oops, sorry.
Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house.
That's right. Okay. Now there's a few things here. Off surface level, what he just says, Tamar, look, I know your second husband died, but I got a third one lined up for you. But he's a little bit He's a bit young. So remain in your father's house till my son is grown, lest he also die like his brothers. Okay. Now something that's again another red flag here. I lost count. This maybe it's number five or six. Lest he also die like his brothers. What does it show from Judah that this is still on his mind? Or like lest he die. Is he? I don't want to say too much, but who can tell me off surface level, like why is he still bringing it up? What does it mean if he's still bringing it up that he's worried that his son might die? Anyone? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, very good. So he doesn't. Yeah, so he doesn't trust in God, and he hasn't looked within himself, or he hasn't looked around, and he said, why is this happening? Why is my firstborn son dying? Why is my second son dying? Why is he disobeying me? Why is he trying to stop my lineage? Why is all this happening? He hasn't looked internally. And this is a consequence of my actions, right? Judah has taken short-term steps, right? He sold his brother. Then he goes to his friends, right, the Adullamite, and he sees the first Canaanite woman, or not first, but we don't know that. But he sees Canaanite woman, and he says, listen, let's marry her. Like, he doesn't take any steps. So he's wondering, he hasn't looked within himself. He's like, why is this not happening to me? He doesn't say that, all right? And he doesn't realize this yet. Because he's... Yeah, there's sort of corruption at the moment, and he just keeps on building on it. So we'll see. He doesn't realize his mistakes, and he doesn't face his corruption, and that's the same as us. Maybe we get too complacent. How many times something that we tell my Sunday school kids is like, there's nothing wrong with doing X, Y, Z, right? But it's like the moment, as long as you need to feel that it's bad, and you need to repent about it, and you need to confess, and you need to keep it in your prayer, and you need to constantly work on it. But the moment you do X, Y, Z, and you don't care anymore, or you don't think it's bad, or you don't feel like any magnitude, like how bad it is, then that's when you get complacent. I think that's probably the worst thing. The worst thing is when I become lukewarm, when I become complacent. And sometimes the higher up we get, or the more quote-unquote status that we get, the more this is easier for us. So we'll see a little bit later that Judah here, maybe has some sort of status, even just a little bit, and we'll see that will eat him up. So it's very important for us to learn from this, and we'll see later on that you need to look inside, okay? There's two people that you can't lie to. I always say it's yourself and God, pretty much. You can lie to whoever, Abuna, your parents, the Pope. If you walked in, you'd probably lie to him. But yourself, your internal monologue, the little man inside you, or little woman inside you, the Holy Spirit, God, you can't lie to these people. So you need to look inside. And we'll get to that in a little sec. So he essentially, he tucks in the reason why his sons died. He did not guide Shelah, and he didn't explain to Shelah maybe what's going on. He just left him. He left him, and again, Judah, he was greedy. Why was he greedy? Because he wanted to keep his remaining son. All right. This is very different to, Abraham. He was willing to sacrifice his only son. Shelah he was the last one, and Judah sort of kept him. And he says, no, he's too young. Let me wait. Okay. But we'll see why this is shazib, or the word the lie, comes into play. So can we read now probably the chunk of the chapter, verse 12 to 20, please.
Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted, and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, Please let me come in to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send a young goat from the flock." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" Then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and your cord, and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away, and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adjamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her.
Thank you. Okay, so coming off the last thing that we just read, so again, Judah tells Tamar to wait for Shelah until he grows, okay? Now, while he says this, or while she's waiting, another person dies. Who died just then?
His wife, Judah's wife.
Judah's wife dies, okay? So I'm going to make this red, okay? So we keep track. Okay? She dies. So what does he do now? He goes, he's sort of comforted, I guess. He goes up and he meets with Hiram, the Adonamite, his friend, to visit the sheep shearers at Timnah, okay? So he goes and he visits the first friend, okay, that he met with at the beginning of the chapter. Now, I'm not sure what verse it was, but Tamar is aware of this. Verse 13, and it was told Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep." Okay, so she knows this. She hears about this. So what she does, she takes off her widow garments, and she puts in a veil, and she sits by the way leading up to Timnah. Okay, because she knew that Shelah was grown. So what happened was Judah had what he lied. Judah lied to Tamar, saying, wait for my younger son to grow up. But she's aware now that Shelah's not grown, and she wasn't given Shelah. Shelah wasn't given to her. So what she did, she took off her widow's garments, and she put on the veil, and she waited around Timnah to where she was aware that Judah was going. Now, when she did that, Judah saw Tamar, and he assumed that she was a harlot, and as a condition, she gives him a few belongings. So she asked, "What would you give to me?" He said, "A young goat," but he still had to go get it. Okay, so what would give me as a pledge? What does he give? He gives her three items: a signet cord, your signet, the cord, and your staff. Okay, and it's very important to keep these three in mind because they'll come into play just a little bit later. Okay. Now, we sort of assumed by the way this ends up that Tamar is is a Hebrew, okay? But without, maybe it's written there somewhere. I couldn't find it. Whether she was a Hebrew or Gentile, off the bat. But this is very important because she was promised something from Judah, essentially a lineage, okay? Essentially children from who, pretty much, it's. I won't say it doesn't matter, but this is generally how it was. Why? Because people back then, they were still waiting for the Messiah, and they wanted the wish for the Messiah to come from them, okay, from their lineage. That's why back then it was bad if you were barren. If you were barren, they're like, what a shame. Like, there's no chance for you to get the Messiah. Okay, so she still longed to have a chance to have the Messiah from her lineage, okay? And as I said, she's sort of been promised two partners. One died, the first one died, the second one refused to have children with her, he died. She was promised a third one, and then the dad is kind of holding him away. Okay. So you could say this was done. Some conservationists say this was done out of purity. She didn't go dress up like that for another man, or she'd be like, okay, I just want children regardless. I don't care who's it from. She was still promised from Judah. Okay. Now this might sound a bit weird, but that's just how it was. So it was sort of the next of kin. I believe so, was Judah. Okay, so this was, she sort of used deception, and this reminds us of two brothers a few chapters back. Who can tell me?
Jacob and Esau.
That's right. Yeah, Jacob and Esau. Okay, so they sort of used deception. Jacob got the birthright at the end, even though it was Esau's at the first, right, at the beginning. But Jacob used sort of deception, and because again Esau wasn't maybe he didn't deserve it or he didn't want it at the end. He was happy to throw away for food. Okay, so we sort of use, it's sort of the same condition here. She was sort of promised something, and they take the promise very seriously. Unlike someone that broke their promise was Judah. Judah broke his promise. Okay, but we see that God, despite this, God will keep his promise at the end. Okay, so like some of the church fathers say, this is done out of purity. This is a pure act, in a sense. Okay. In comparison to Judah, when his wife passed away, and then again he sees a harlot, and he lets his lust take over. Okay, so in that case we'll move on from 21 to 27. Yeah, Mark. It was done out of purity, like it's out of like where it came from. I guess some of like the church fathers say, she kept it to the next of kin. She didn't go out and have relation with any other man. It was sort of like within the family, and it was because she was sort of promised, and she wanted to it was a chance to have the Messiah. She wanted that to happen. Again, it's very important here that she only waited for Judah. She didn't wait for anyone else. It's not like the first chance that she got. Or these men were not promised me, or Judah lied to me, so I'm just going to leave and do whatever. She still listened to what Judah said, and she waited, she still kept her faith, and she was still faithful towards him. I think that's right. Like, that's what the church father said, because I thought the same thing as well. Yeah, Chris.
The majority of the church fathers say that.
Well, from what I read, it's definitely out of purity. I think she chose. Like she didn't, like she could have done whatever. She could have just left. She had many options, but she still wanted. It was the sort of the next of kin. Was okay, if it's not Shalal, it's going to be Judah. So we said 21 to 27. Whoever's got the mic.
Then he asked the men of that place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside?" And they said, "There was no harlot in this place." So he returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. Then Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, lest he be ashamed, for I sent this young goat, and you have not found her." And it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry." So Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff." So Judah acknowledged them and said, She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah my son." And he never knew her again. Now it came to pass at the time of giving birth that, behold, twins were in her womb.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Carol. Yeah. No. No. So again, what Judah did, he wasn't right. Yeah, what he did, he wasn't right. But he got his redemption. He got his chance, where Judah acknowledges finally, which we'll get to. So yeah, so this is the comparison. Judah, he didn't know who this person was, and he just took advantage of the situation. But Tamar was only doing this for one reason, and like she not picked a target. That sounds weird, but like Judah wasn't like that was the only Judah. Like she could have picked any other person, or she could have left everyone, but she didn't do that because that's sort of adultery or harlotry. But this is like, again, using deception was the next of kin. I think that's my opinion. Yeah. So when Judah brings back the sheep, Tamar is not there. Again, she didn't fulfill the condition, as in this wasn't like an exchange. She left straight away. She took his 3 belongings and left, because she'll use those 3 belongings later, which we saw. So again, 3 months later, I'm not sure what verse that is. Verse 24. Tamar is brought to Judah here, and it says, "Look, your daughter-in-law Tamar, she conceived by harlotry." outrageous, right? Now Judah here he's like us, not like this situation, but he's like us. He says, "Oh, how could this be? I'd never do such a thing, right?" Like that's what we say. How often do we say, "Oh, like shame on this person for doing this and that," but it's like, I just did this the other week, right? Or I judge this person for doing this and that, but who am I to judge? We have our own sins. So it's very ironic here. So Judah himself was the one that had committed adultery. He committed adultery with Tamar, and yet he is condemning her. So what does he say as soon as that? So when she's brought out, when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Please determine who these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff." Okay? So she didn't receive the goat from Judah, so Judah left to go get the goat. Okay, she ran off. And she has kept these three belongings. So this is where Judah, he gets his sort of a turning point. Okay, Judah, he realizes this. He says, and he's caught red-handed here. He says, okay, yeah, that's right. She's been more righteous than I. And he finally acknowledges what he did. After all these, mistakes that he did, he finally acknowledges. It might not be the best time for him, but he does. He really does. He acknowledges it. And I think that's what we need to do here. This is the story of redemption. He, despite all of his shortcomings in this chapter, it's very important towards the end that he acknowledged what he did wrong. And that's similar to what I mentioned before is, it's very bad when you become so accustomed to sin or something that you don't acknowledge it. The moment you stop acknowledging it, the Holy Spirit, right, gone. Like, as in, the Holy Spirit's not working in you. Like, you're not feeling your mistake. You're not feeling responsible. You're not feeling guilty. You're not feeling repentant. So it's very important here that we keep that fire burning, as they say. Keep the fire burning. You can't let it die out. Because if you don't let it die out, and you're committing sin, left, right, center, but you're not feeling anything about it, you're not feeling bad about it, then that's where we need to really check ourselves. We need to look inside ourselves. Okay? So Judah here he finally does his first good thing, this chapter, I guess. And he condemns himself, and he essentially admits he's worse than Tamar at this point. He really humbles himself. He puts himself down. He sort of have, a few verses before, people were saying, "Judah, look at this, your daughter-in-law." But he puts himself down in front of the people and says, he could have said that after. He could have said, "Nah, I'll burn her, and I'll hide my mistake." But no, he had a chance to show everyone. He had a chance to humble himself in front of everyone, and he took it. So he took that chance with both hands. Now, sort of towards the end of the chapter, could we just read 28 and 30? Sorry, 28 to 30, please.
And so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his head, and his name was called Zerah.
Very good, thank you. So we're judging, right? Twins, right? Oh my God. Alright? I'm just going to put on here. Alright, here she bears twins, okay? And what happens the first time? So this one I sort of had to read a bunch of times, and the fact that I wrote a page just on this makes no sense. So it's very, very quickly, the one put out his hand. So the one stuck out his hand during childbirth. And the midwife straight away, she took the scarlet thread and she bound it on the hands of the child, okay? This is to signify who the firstborn, okay? Generally, so the firstborn, they get the birthright, okay? So this is straight away. We got him, all right? Now, what happened is, she says this one came out first. But what happens quickly was the baby drew its hand back. So the baby got the scarlet, I guess like cord or bracelet, you could say, I'm not too sure. And its hand went back, it retracted, okay? Let me just check my notes just in case. Yeah, so it still kept the scarlet thing, and it retracted in this room, okay? And this one was called Zerah. But there was also a second baby. So the second baby was the one that fully came out. So this is called Perez. Now, the thing is to know here that this one fully came out. So this one was now the firstborn. Even though the first one, it stuck its hand out, it's like, no, he got the bracelet and it's like, I don't even know how that's possible, but it happened. Okay, and the midwife was shocked here. Okay, now I'm gonna color code this because I was losing my mind. Okay. Now there's a reason why these are two. Okay, these are sort of two colors. Okay, and it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, so the first one is okay. I'll just spoil it. Okay, so like the lineage of Christ came from Perez. Okay, not from Zerah. Okay, but there's a reason why. So the baby that appeared to not be first, but the one that was fully born, was fully out of the womb, was the Perez, and that bore Christ. The lineage came from Christ comes from that. But they say that the firstborn, so the red one, red means bad, not really, but Zerah is, they can like represent the Jewish nation. Now why is that? Because they sort of like they came up first, like they were keen first. Yeah, you could almost say they were in like a prime position. You know, they had everything, but they went out and they hesitated. They went out and they came. Nope. Like why is that? Because as we see later on, like the Jewish nation are very flaky, right? They cause so many headaches. They've already caused headaches. All right, and it's a little bit like us as well. You know, we always get likened to the Jewish nation because, you know, despite the sort of being spoon-fed, right? You know, these guys are meant to be the firstborn. We say one day I come at church doing this. The other day I'm doing that. One day I say I'm going to pray this. I set up this, and I don't do it. Or one day I'm in Sunday school preaching. You know, I say do this, but when I go home I don't do that, right? So we're likened to this Jewish nation. So we're Zerah. Okay, keep that in mind. Don't forget it. Otherwise I will. Now, otherwise, unlike the second baby, the one that fully came out is like the Gentiles. You know, the ones the unlikely. Yeah, they're sort of the underdogs. Like the Gentiles, like the Jewish, like what Gentiles? You guys don't know anything. But the Gentiles were the ones that actually were like nurtured. You know, they were sort of starving, but they're the ones that they received the word gladly, and that's the word. You know, the key word here is gladly. They weren't flaky or they weren't unsure or they didn't stick out the hand one moment, retract it. No, they fully came out, and it's sort of like again, a certain someone held someone's ankle out of the womb, like what the ankle. I think it was the ankle. Who knows? Again, it was I'm not sure what chapter. A few chapters ago. There's twins came out. But this is sort of the opposite. So the one that came out first of these twins, yeah, again, that's very good. Very good of it. It's the same one. So again, Jacob and Esau. So Esau was the one that came out first, but Jacob came out holding his ankle. Okay, and so this is here the sort of the verse. So Jacob was the one that Esau, sort of had the birthright, but it was Jacob that took it off him. But here it's undone now. It's reversed. The one that Zerah was meant to come out first, and they thought he was going to come out first, but it was actually Perez. Perez was the one who, you know, the unlikely, the underdog here. He came out first. So he's sort of the firstborn. He's the official firstborn, and through this we receive the lineage of Christ. Now I'm not saying Zerah is bad. You know, this is just for me to define him because it was very confusing when I was read it. Now, why is this the case? As I said, because God here kept his promise. And this is very important to understand. I think a lot of times, you know, it's mentioned, how many times do we like acknowledge God's promises in the Bible, like towards us? You know, we've been promised so many things, and we say, yeah, God, why do you leave me like this? So it's important that we need to take, you know, God's promise, we need to grab it with both hands, okay? This is also, you know, and we say how they sort of both, Judah and Tamar, they've been redeemed here, okay? And we see in, please don't make it up. So Matthew chapter 1, if you look at the genealogy, they are actually mentioned here. So they've sort of redeemed themselves. Judah begot Perez by Zerah, Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and so on and so forth. But if you read through here, you know, how many females are mentioned here? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Perez, Zerah, Hezron. I'm not going to say that. Nashalon, Salmon, Boaz, Rahab, Boaz, Abed, Ruth. Ruth's there. But, you know, there's not very many people, right? There's barely anyone. Until you get to who? Mary. Gedan, Zadok, Nathan, again here. And Jacob before Joseph's husband of Mary, who was Christ. So Tamar here, through her her sort of sacrifice, and it's sort of a risk. You know, she was risked to be called a harlot. You know, she could have, you know, she was about to be burned, right? You know, via this risk and via, you know, her will and her acknowledgement of, you know, the promise, you know, she kept any promises close to her. You know, she's not here, she's mentioned in the book of Matthew, chapter 1. You know, while other women are not mentioned here. So I guess it's very important to keep that in mind, you know. You need to keep, this is all about keeping God's promise. God's promise here is fulfilled. No matter how ugly this got, right? This looks like a spider web. You know, how many tries? 3 tries. But it's, you know, despite all this, they're able to bear Christ. You know, Christ came from this. You know, no matter how ugly it looks, right? No matter how messed up it is, you know, God still, this beauty that comes out of this. And this is something, it's going to sound generic as it is, but, you know, this is really our life right here. You know, how often do we acknowledge God's promise? How often do we take into consideration? You know, when you pray to God, you say, God, do you promise me this? You know, let it be your will. And again, this is through his timing. This might not have been the best way. You know, Judah could have married someone that wasn't a Canaanite. Or Onan here could have just listened to his dad. But, you know, this wasn't the most ideal situation. This is 3 steps. You know, they could have done it in one go. But, you know, that's the lesson you need to keep in mind. So, you know, overall, what did you learn? Obviously, God kept his promise, despite Judah marrying a Canaanite woman, despite him lying to Tamar, despite committing adultery with Tamar, and despite judging her as well, you know, after what he did. See, this is just 4 things just for Judah alone. You know, you know, and this, you know, like we could chuck our name in here. You know, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. You know, imagine if you really think about what you've done. You know, you can put your name in here, insert your name here. And, you know, you would feel like, if this is your name, you'd be like, okay, God, you know, why can't you forgive me? Oh, God, you promised me this. So it's important that we don't judge others as well. Because if that was us in this situation, and let's say you were like, I don't know, you're reading it third person or like a third party, and you saw your name here, you'd wish, you know, your name would be cleared. Scratch off all this. Take this off. I need redemption. Give me redemption. You know, we say, you know, the right-hand thief is the best example. And it's so true. You know, if that was us at the right-hand thief, we'd be wishing, be like, you know, repent. Like, let's say we're watching it, like a replay or something, I'm not sure. And you'd still hope that, you know, if you were the right-hand thief, you would hope that God would accept you. So again, it's better for us to not judge. And, you know, this chapter is very good. You know, we're very quick to judge Judah and Tamar. Oh, what are you doing? You harlot. You don't know she's a harlot. It's your daughter-in-law. You know, very quick to judge. You know, it sounds crazy, right? But then, you know, God's grace comes at the end. And, you know, he fulfilled his promise, which is the most important thing. And you see here as well, just the last thing before I finish off. Jacob caused, one second, chapter 49. So Jacob, then I'm going to skip ahead. So Jacob, he'll call his children around him, right? And he'll just describe, you know, what each of my children will do, or what happens out of their lineage, okay? And he mentions Judah here, right? So Judah is a lion's cub. From being assured to my son, you have grown up. No, that's not it. Yeah, this time. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. In your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah, lion's cub, from being assured, my son, you have grown up. He bows down and slept as a lion and a cub. Who shall rouse him? Okay. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from his loins, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the expectation of the nations. Okay, so he mentions here a lion. A lion will come here. You know, like what do they say? A lion is in the jungle. What's the king of the jungle? Okay, and this imagery of of a lion comes in Revelation. Okay, just before I finish. Revelation again. Now, the book of Revelation here says regarding the scroll, just like honestly, the whole passage is about the lion, but let's see just 7 verses. And I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or look at it. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." And I looked, behold, in the midst of the throne and 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out of the earth. Okay, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is like the lion comes back. Christ comes back. Okay, and that's like the sort of, and this is said by Jacob all in the first book of the Bible, in Genesis, end to end. Like we're out here in Revelation, this is the last chapter, last book in the Bible. But this was already proclaimed in Genesis. Okay, Jacob had already proclaimed this to his children. He said, the lion will come out of your race. So even despite all Jacob did, he still carries on. God still carried his name, and his lineage still progressed. Yeah, thank you. Glory be to God for it. Any questions? Yes. Yeah. Again, this is God's will. What do you think? Was Onan's death severe? I mean, he disobeyed 2 things. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, one. Thank you.
Okay, well, if you follow the story and you read it, you find that Judas said, And actually, I want to draw your attention about gossiping, the sin of gossiping. So all of that is happening in the background because Judah was in one place and Tamar was in another place in Timnah. Timnah is like place for the Gentiles, but Judah was like with his cattle and sheep somewhere, like, going around. But the people actually made the connection. So they told Tamar that your father-in-law coming to Timnah to shear his sheep, and when he came there, he actually found this lady and he committed adultery with her. And she was smart enough to take those three stuff from him, and also those three stuff has a meaning for us when we fall into the sin of fornication that takes our identity, takes the shepherdhood from us. Find in Psalm 23, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, you prepare a table. So what I'm trying to say here that the church, the church father looked at it as a paradox between the senior man, the very righteous from whom Christ came as a descendant, and Joseph that was very righteous and very honest, although that caused him lots of trouble. The virtue of Tamar that she didn't want to accuse him publicly of committing the sin with her, because it's by law. It's one of the بيسموها محرمات, like exactly like a brother cannot marry his sister, so a father-in-law cannot marry his daughter-in-law. So the only person that will solve the situation is his third son, that he was scared to give it to her in marriage should he be killed as well. He didn't know the reason. He didn't know what Onan did, like for him to deprive his brother's wife to have children. But he said, like, at least he will die as well. And he tried to avoid the scenario. And the Bible says after that he didn't know her. That means he wasn't interested in her, and it was by law. It's not preferable for someone to have his daughter-in-law as his wife. So she's righteous in a sense that she didn't defame him. She covered the situation, and she told the messengers, only make sure who is those staff and signet ring belongs to.
When Judah mistook Tamar as a harlot, why didn't you tell him who she was? Or was she trying to be mistaken as a harlot? I'm a bit confused. Why don't you be like, I'm your daughter-in-law, Yeah, well, I just... Yeah. Oh, so she wanted to fall pregnant. She wanted her rights. Yeah. And her rights, if she doesn't go back to Judah's family, she doesn't have any rights. Oh, okay, okay. She's like an olive, like a wild olive tree that has been plucked into the tree of God. So the holy tree of God is the 12 tribes from which Christ will come, and Judas is one, the main one, that Lord Jesus will come from his descendants. Okay. So Tamar here in the situation, she's just capitalizing on this. Yeah. She acted wisely to actually sustain her rights, to have the family. Okay. So she wasn't necessarily playing a harlot. She just was gaining her rights to be back in the lineage of Christ. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because she didn't just go to anyone. She was just only Judah. She didn't just.
She knew he was coming.
Yeah, that's right. Because she knew. Yeah, but she could have very easily just found anyone.
Yeah,
the first guy on the road. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It was very risky. Yeah. Yeah, and I think just the comparison of, in that situation at the end, Judah's comparison versus Tamar's comparison, she didn't, as a woman said, she didn't defame him, but Judah's like, burn her, straight away. So I think the comparison is very, very just. Anything else? No? anything else? All good? Thank you. Whoever's go for it.
All right, so thank you very much, Mina Gouhar. Such a great Bible study. I'm sure everyone else learned something very great. It's very educational, so thanks, Mina. So in terms of announcements today, we have a few. So Christian Aid is every Tuesday, and it's from 6:50 to 8:45 on a Tuesday night. It's a combined service with St. Barb's Church. It's it's helping the homeless people. So if anyone's interested, I think it's a great opportunity to reach out and serve in that way. Next one is youth every Friday, 8 p.m. Carols, save the date, 8th of December. So it's a great event that's going to be held here at church, so make sure you guys put that day in your calendar. There will be food after today, and the volleyball net is set up today as well. So if anyone wants to go, it'll be great to have friendly competition with everyone and play there today. So if everyone can make their way there after the food, that would be great. Also next week we're going to utilize, it's a public holiday next Monday. So we're going to utilize that day. We're going to do a barbecue and volleyball comp after the Bible study. We may start half an hour early the Bible study, just depending, but that's to be confirmed. So for now it's still the same, everything as usual, but just a barbecue and volleyball comp after. Does anyone have any announcements or anything they want to add? What time does that start, Wuna? Awesome, thank you, Wuna. Can we please stand up for prayer? Thank you.